Welcome to the FINK podcast. It isn't until it is.
In which we discuss the various moving parts in a life in music. I'm Finn.
I'm Tim.
I'm Guy.
Welcome back to the FINK podcast. This is episode 3 of season 5 of the FINK podcast. It isn't until it is. And it's part 2 of our long-running series on producers.
Yeah, exploration.
We had a big old one on the last one about like producers and what little knowledge we have of the history thereof.
We did quite well, I thought.
I thought we did all right. This one we're going to talk about the digital revolution and what happened next. Really, I want to start by kind of talking about how often like revolutions in art are created with a kind of technological advance in hand. Microphone, electrification of amplification of music, how you put things down, blah, blah, blah. Digital revolution speaks for itself, really. It was the birth of the digital elements, the inhuman angles, which I find fascinating because I was a big part of this movement in my own tiny little way.
Yeah.
There's lots going on in the 80s, 90s and 2000s, isn't there?
Absolutely. The first thing could probably be, synthesizers went overground in the 80s.
Yeah.
So, there were very few records in the 80s that weren't using synthesizers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pop records, rock records. But, you guys wanted to kind of focus on hip-hop because that was the big that was probably, along with dance music, that was probably the big innovation in the 80s.
Well, from my perspective as a kid at the time, I wasn't interested at all in any other kind of music. I saw being in a band as the most old-fashioned thing you could possibly think of. Why would I want to listen to a drummer, a bass player, a guitarist, and a singer like my parents did when I've got the future to listen to, which is hip-hop and acid house?
Yeah.
And those two forms of music were kind of, now as with an older head on, I look back on that and see that as a kind of a version of punk, a version of outside of the mainstream, kids doing stuff for other kids just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
And any kind of commercial success was eschewed, was you considered, in bad taste. In the electronic revolution, you wouldn't use your name, you wouldn't have a press shot, we didn't have managers, we didn't have agents.
Sounds so good.
I was signed to Ninja Tune. If someone wanted to book me for a gig, they'd just call Ninja Tune. It was kind of pre everything.
Yeah.
And technology was the driving factor here. And there's some really nice details. You can probably speak to what was going on in rock and what would become known as indie.
Yeah.
At this time, which I have no knowledge of at all. It's a complete blank sweep for me.
Right.
Because I was listening to electro mixtapes and recording radio shows in Bristol and making compilation tapes of hip hop and acid house.
Yeah.
And then I became that guy, and then I was producing that stuff.
Yeah.
And then I kind of met you guys a lot later and turned into the thing I never wanted to be.
Yeah, I know. It's,
it's
kind of crazy, that, isn't it? But the weird thing is that, what you said about the fact it's like a punk revolution in its own way, I would say that it's probably more revolutionary, far more revolutionary than punk, because punk basically did the same thing, but just slightly differently, which is the guitar, bass, drums, and using a producer in a studio. Whereas hip-hop, etc., and electronic music, dance music, that completely changed all of that. You didn't need to be in a studio anymore. You didn't even need to kind of record things with mics anymore.
Absolutely not.
It would just go straight into, the bucks. And also, hip hop came very much from the streets, right?
For sure.
Yeah, which punk kind of didn't in that kind of way.
Well, different streets.
But you wouldn't get people. You would get people creating hip hop on street corners, quite literally.
For me, the connection between what was happening with sort of British underground and American underground in the early 80s, it sounds very different.
Yeah.
Because the life experience is very different, but it's the same thing. It's we're making music for us, for our community to listen to, and there is no career path or financial incentive to do so other than paying your rent or looking cool or getting laid or whatever is your motivation. And the industry is not interested in you because there's nothing to exploit here.
Yeah.
And so with the birth of like hip hop culture, which has spawned loads of producers that has changed what we think of music. What is music? I mean, there was a big discussion in the early days of is rap even music? Because it's essentially just beats and spoken word. So does it even count anymore? And stuff like this. My answer to that is it's consumed by your ears. So technically, you could call almost anything that is music in a way.
Yeah.
But the hip hop revolution was kind of like a 3-pronged attack. It was like art, dance, and music in one movement. And the art side of things brought us the free art movement, as in here's art that you can't buy. You can only witness it one time going by on a train or on the wall of a street and be like, wow, that's really cool. And that's all you get. You can't buy it. You can't invest in it. No one can, no one can come in and exploit that. That's just what it is, free art movement, and that which has led to Banksy and Shepard Fairey and all this other great stuff. Breakdancing, okay, that was co-opted really fast. It's like, here's a craze, the kids are into it, we're going to make Breakdance 2 Electric Boogaloo, where they save the community centre by breakdancing, and it happened.
That movie had a massive impact.
Oh, no doubt. I remember it really clearly. Turbo, he could pop lock really well, and who wasn't backspinning on their mother's lino at that point? I certainly was. Tim, he wasn't. Okay.
I can confirm, I definitely wasn't.
I was in a crew. I was in the Future Shock crew at that point. Yeah, man, we were burning. We were loving it. I was rubbish. But on the musical side of things, you had this almost like a forgotten generation, which is what links it directly to punk, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You had this feeling of like a completely forgotten generation that are completely sidelined. There's nothing in culture for them to buy into because it's all someone else's culture for sale. And they basically, coming out of go-go and disco and this kind of party thing, they needed to express this feeling of simultaneously, let's just not think about all that stuff and just have a good party. You know, let's just Sugar Hill Gang this. Let's just have fun, yeah? Let's ignore all of this. And you get this kind of bravado rap, the first wave of kind of like, rapper's delight, basically. And then quite quickly, by 82, 83, you suddenly had kind of social commentary happening, big time. And with tracks like The Message, where you would have music that you thought was really amazing, but it was basically expose of everything that was wrong with where we are and what we're doing here, what's being done to us, which is amazing to mix politics and music so effortlessly. And it was like the producers working in this field were really working with technology that was being used in completely the wrong way.
Yes.
So there's a bit of backstory on this, and people are more than welcome to correct me when I'm obviously very wrong, but the Japanese technology firms were making equipment that was designed to replace drummers with drum machines and replace bass players with 101s and 303s. And obviously an utter failure, total disaster, because both of them were terrible at doing that one thing they were supposed to do. But which meant that the market was flooded with all of this stuff, which was dirt cheap on sale because nobody wants it. You can pick up an 808 for a couple of $100. And so these really early pioneers, these really early producers, you could just buy a couple of these machines and a mic. And you were off. You were doing the music that you loved to listen to. And although the slick pop side of this, with the LL Cool J's and the Run DMCs of this, now that sounds really great. It's obviously produced by Rick Rubin. It's produced by someone who knows what they're doing, and everything sounds great. The really early old school hip hop stuff, it sounds pretty ropey, but it's really because they weren't producers. They just bought the machine. And pressed the buttons. And that's interesting. Oh, that sounds good. And you couldn't make music with any less. A cheap drum machine and a mic, that's entry level. And before you know it, some of these tracks were going gold and going platinum. They're bursting out of the inner cities and crossing over, and kind of the rest is history. It developed from there with the technology sort of arm in arm.
So was there any crossover? I mean, I get the impression that the producers of all this stuff started very much from that, producing that stuff. There was probably very few producers who were doing something else in the 70s. They were producing traditionally kind of bands, etc. And then they kind of graduated.
I can't think of any.
No,
because it was such. It reminds me of this conversation that I had with management years ago, where I said, "Oh, I can write songs, and I want to write country songs. So why don't you just send me to Nashville? Because I can write country songs. It's easy." And I was told in no uncertain terms, "No, legitimacy is what it's all about, and you're not a country artist from Tennessee with the backstory that you need to do this. It's like you saying, I want to write rap music, send me to New York and I'll write some rap." It's like, doesn't work like that. And I think that's one of the things that's baked in to early hip hop.
Yeah.
And that is the authenticity and the legitimacy of it was the 100% of the whole gig.
Right.
So you've got like certain parameters where the mainstream would try and co-opt it with things like Vanilla Ice and Morris Minor and the Majors, and stuff where they go, "Oh, rap, we can make some money out of that." MC Hammer and so on. But the groundswell that was creating all of this was genuinely just a constant throughput of kids going like, "Well, if it's that easy, I can do that because I'm living in the next tenement block down, and our crew has its own experience we want to talk about as well." Mixed with the whole technology, you don't need any experience or education or now money to get involved. If you can lend me a couple of $100, I can buy a drum machine and a beat of 58, and me and my mates are making music in my mum's bedroom.
Because like even disco, you didn't even get disco producers who were then going,
they just couldn't.
Like Nile Rodgers didn't produce any hip hop.
Couldn't.
For example.
Well, the hip hop guys, because very soon after this, you had samplers, and you didn't even need a band. You could just sample another band, really quickly. Yeah. So a lot of the producers, like Nile Rodgers, they were massively important in hip hop culture because you're producing their production, you're sampling their productions.
Yeah, sure.
That's why it sounds so great. But or James Brown was sampled loads in the early days.
I was going to say, I mean,
that production on those drums is killer.
Well, the Amen break. I mean,
absolutely,
the absolute cornerstone of all of this.
Yeah,
there's an even entire. I think now, even I say grey old man here, I think there's an entire genre which is called breakcore.
There you go.
Which is literally an entire genre of just using that one drum break. Which is to be fair, it's really cool. I really like it.
But I kind of did my dissertation on this at college, and so there's a real connection between social factors making the music happening. The social factors are pushing this music out of culture. And so hence why I absolutely can draw the line really easily between rap and punk. Yeah. It's the UK in the late 70s, super depressed. It's fine if you're in London, but if you're in Hull, it would make you want to join a punk band and scream into a microphone. There's no future for you. Yeah. And rap was exactly the same. There's no future for me either. My options are be the pimp who looks really great, or nothing. There's no option. Yeah. Which gives the early producers of hip hop culture and stuff a real legitimacy in terms of like how pure it all was, because there's no money in it. Yeah. And there's no future in it. The most you could hope for would be you might get to do a party and everyone thinks you're really cool. Yeah. And that's why you're doing it. Yeah. Which links at the same time to dance music, because at the same time in the early 80s that you had this thing happening, you also had technology, the same tech, turntables and cheap drum machines and synths that you could buy, and you could go clubbing, listen to dance music, go home, make it, play it to all your mates, and that's it. You're in. You're doing it. You're a producer now. Yeah. This moment really blurs the lines of what a producer is and what they actually do, because a producer like William Orbit, in this era, the producer would make everything. You wouldn't actually have any musicians. Right. You would make, me included at this time, you'd do the drums yourself, the bass yourself, the synth yourself, the song yourself, you'd master it yourself, you'd have it in your own studio, you'd buy the gear, the producer became the person that did everything. And you might get a singer in. Sing over the top, and there you go. It's and obviously these early producers had absolutely no skills at all about how do you compress a vocal. They
Yeah.
didn't have a compressor, me included. I remember we recorded in one of Guy's dad's little studios, and he had a couple of compressors lying around, and and you let me take them, and I took them back to my studio, and there were these Drama compressors. I had absolutely no idea what it did.
Right.
And the thing is with the compressor is it doesn't make any noise.
No.
You put stuff through it, and it changes the noise.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really do anything for electronic music. So I put it in my rack, and I turned it on, and was just like staring at it, being like, well, everyone says it's a thing, but I don't get it. It doesn't do anything, you know? Because when you're making techno, you don't really need a compressor. Not now, sure, but back then you really didn't. So the fact that the technology was easily available, you didn't need a studio, you didn't need a budget, and you didn't need any education at all. You didn't have to go to music school or do an internship or anything. You could just buy the gear and make it.
Yeah.
Meant that dance music and rap music and punk were like, at a moment in time, all aligned.
Yeah.
You know?
But the big difference, I would say, is that punk still needed a studio for the most part.
I suppose you have to be able to play your instruments.
You play your instruments, but also
Punk was still drawing from instrumentally. Yeah, it was still drawing from the same traditional bass, drums, guitar route. But Finn is absolutely right about the
spirit,
the context of the genuine counterculture, really countercultural, and actually having an impact on society, not just counterculture for its own sake.
Yeah, I mean, you have governments stepping in and saying, well, we're not sure that our kids should be allowed to listen to this. We need to put a parental advisory sticker on the front to say, parents, beware. This is,
complete insanity. The minute it was Tipper Gore and the Parents Music Resource Centre created that explicit lyric, and what they discovered was every record they put it on sold 3 times more.
Exactly.
Of course.
I remember when I first had the message on a cassette, and I went swimming at school with these 2 twins that live around the corner, and their dad gave us a lift to the swimming pool, and he was like, anyone got any, do you want to listen to any music, kids? And I immediately whipped out this tape and said, yeah, I got some music, you should play this.
Yeah.
And on comes the message, and it's got like, people pissing on the stage, you know, they just don't care. And he literally ripped the cassette out of the, what filth? How could you possibly ruin my kids with this filth? And it was like, this is what we were all listening to in the playground. This was really cool. And, you know, let's be honest, you know, the crack epidemic in the States in the 80s, we would know nothing about that if it wasn't for rap music. Yeah. And Chuck D from Public Enemy famously said, you know, we're the black CNN. This is how we disseminate information to our people, kind of thing. And I think all cultures have a means of communication and a form of art, and, you know, that makes them who they are.
Yeah.
And now when the hip-hop guys 50 years on, they talk about doing it for the culture and stuff.
Yeah.
It's that culture they're talking about, actually. It's not the kind of culture of Bentley, you know, Maybachs and stuff like that. It's more just the culture of us speaking to us about us. It's actually, which is punk.
So because the thing is, the indie scene in the 80s and 90s, that was continuing to kind of produce big names. But how did the kind of hip hop and dance producers, how did they kind of make a name for themselves in this DIY kind of, you know, I mean, Rick Rubin is, I'm not very good at this at this area of music, but Rick Rubin is obviously a big name,
massive name, because like with a lot of the great producers of the later era. He mixed 2 things which hadn't been mixed together before, and everyone goes nuts for it. And his vibe was rock and hip hop.
Did he do Tougher Than Leather? Run DMC's?
Possibly, I don't know.
That was a crucial.
He did Walk This Way, which globalized hip hop culture in one hit.
Well,
and
I was going to say, if you think about it, Beastie Boys had both, because like that Fight for Your Right to Party, it had the guitar element that reminds you of the Aerosmith. I think he
sampled. Didn't he sample Slayer or something for that? Or he sampled someone.
He used one of those
Black
guitarists.
Sabbath or something.
Yeah.
Rick Rubin was that guy. He was kind of like he was obsessed with the culture because he was there in New York and loving it and part of it and wearing the outfits and everything. But similarly, because because of who he was and his background, he had all this heavy metal and rock elements going on.
Yeah.
And you know, you got to admit, man, what a genius! The energies have similarity.
Yeah.
And a part of his genius as a producer, apart from to have that idea and find a way for it to happen, is to persuade Run DMC to do it.
Yeah.
Because how do you get... They were huge at the time. They were like supporting Madonna and stuff. Run DMC were enormous already. But Rick Rubin had to famously persuade Run DMC to do that. And the difficulty with that is that Run DMC, as the pioneers that they were in this movement, were also very, very conscious of being exploited. You know, it was very important to not be. You know, it's a big part of this. Yeah. And so doing a cover of a band as Middle America, as Aerosmith, is like, that's absolutely off the table. That's a massive no. Because it wasn't even like, we'll write the verses and they'll play the riffs. It was, you're covering Aerosmith.
Yeah.
But he famously cajoled them and annoyed them and said, oh, just do it. Don't worry, we won't use it. Just do it. Just quickly do it.
Yeah. I think he also told them how to approach it in like those lyrics and kind of how to make them their own.
I wonder if it was the same. I wonder if Aerosmith had the same conversation with their manager.
I think they probably did, although Aerosmith were desperate for a hip injection at that point,
right?
Because they were like early '80s. They were really down on their luck.
I mean, I think
for all the big Aerosmith songs that you now know,
I think "Walk This Way," apart from introducing the 808 drum machine to like the whole world, was also, I mean, in 80, I want to say 84, it might be 85. I was like 12, so right in the crosshairs for my mind, blow my mind, I'm in kind of thing. Yeah. And Walk This Way was, I remember seeing Run DMC on Top of the Pops doing that.
Yeah, sure.
And it was such a moment. And I remember saying to them, they were all wearing parkas.
Yes.
And saying to my dad, you know, why are they all wearing coats? It's like no one else wears coats. It's because they were so outside of Top of the Pops.
Yeah.
It was an amazing moment. And Rick Rubin, no matter what you think of him now, and what you think of what he did to the Beastie Boys, especially if you've read their book, which is amazing, but he doesn't come out very well from that at all. No. He definitely was behind some of the most important rap records of the time, pushing these things forward.
So who else was? I mean, Russell Simmons was
like the entrepreneur.
Yeah,
Grandmaster Flash was the DJ behind Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5. He did a track called Adventures on the Wheels of Steel, which was basically a turntable moment on an album.
Yeah.
And Grandmaster Flash, their records were kind of very glitzy, post-go-go disco type, dance-along type rap records. They all had the outfits. They were kind of crossing over.
Yeah.
And so they were making albums. And then on an album, there's a 7 minutes of turntablism and scratching before that was a thing.
Right.
Where you were introduced to the concept of using turntables as an instrument, which led to like, you know, DJing.
Yeah, sure.
Which is pretty important. This is belt drive, not magnet drive. It's very in pre-mixers. It was pre all the tech you need to do this. Really quite incredible. So you had him doing that. At the same time, you had people like Dre and the West Coast guys that had a completely different sound.
So Dre was NWA, right?
Dre was NWA. And before that, he was also a big DJ on the scene.
Right.
But I mean, to go back to DJing for a second, a producer as a DJ, before that, you had kind of Larry Levan at Paradise Garage in New York, where he'd be DJing sort of post-disco stuff, looping it up live, making these moments happen, but not like making any records, still reacting.
Yes.
Whereas someone like Dre, as soon as he had access to a sampler, early samplers were really basic. The 950 I used to use had 950K of memory.
Wow.
So you had maybe 2 samples.
Sure.
And they would be very bad quality.
Yeah.
Makes MP3 look like a Rolls Royce.
Yeah,
and we're talking really bad quality. That's why these early rap records are so crunchy.
Yeah.
You can take a tiny bit, but the West Coast has got a different experience than the East Coast. And so the West Coast is very much more kind of, I don't know, had a different lean on it.
Yeah.
And NWA, they seemed much more angry in a laid-back way, which was more terrifying than the New York side of things, which was like, you know, my 9mm and stuff. You know, it was very kind of like, wow, New York sounds intense. LA was just kind of like, yo, I'm going to shoot you over nothing. This is a gang thing, and it was very open. Yeah. And NWA was instantaneously like out of like, oh my God, even listening to it as a kid, you were like, I can't let my parents let me hear this record. And Dre was putting this really cool, aggressive lean on by using all this sort of 70s West Coast gangster soul, and it was really kind of cool and interesting. Because the sampler was allowing you to raid your parents' record collection and pick the good bits.
So, I mean, I'm just wondering how all of this furthered the kind of relationship between an act and a producer. You know, because it seems as though what was happening was the producer it wasn't a case of a hip hop act saying, "Hey, we're a hip hop act. Now we need a producer." It would almost be like the producer was kind of within them already.
But it's totally built into the act.
Yeah.
And I would imagine there was probably a lot of distrust of anyone else coming in and doing something. So in a lot of the early hip hop albums, a lot of the albums from like the late 80s, it would be a picture of them in their studio or in a studio. If you see them in a really big fancy studio, you think you maybe rented that for the shoot, because when you make a hip hop record, you don't need 48 channels of a mixing desk. You need 4,
right?
And you can do that with a Tascam there. So a lot of times you'd see these crews would be like they're in their own home studio. You could tell it's in the background, and it's just like a room with a screen and a couple of drum machines in it, and it was almost like the producer was simultaneously the old school producer as we know it is redundant in this scene. Don't need him. And the producer became this new thing in the scene, which is I'm in the band. Even more than that, I am. Without me, there is no band. Without me, it's just a guy on a mic. And so all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's hundreds of producers. And dance music was even more exponential. You just do it on your own. And it was where we get the expression bedroom producer from. You do it in your spare room, or you do it in your bedroom.
Good evening. It's going to be a good one, isn't it, tonight? I can feel it already.
After the global reputation of Wheels Turn Beneath My Feet, comes finally the follow-up, Wheels 2. Contains 10 live cuts recorded between 2014 and 2019 in London, Paris, Berlin, Amsterdam, and more. Includes some delicious versions of our biggest live tracks, including Resurgam, Pilgrim, Looking Too Closely, and an absolutely beautiful version of We Watch the Stars. Wheels Turn Beneath My Feet, Volume 2, new FINK live album. Stream everywhere now or buy on vinyl and CD from finkmusic.net or wherever you score your music.
Thank you.
Isn't that nice? You'd hope so. It's the new FINK record. Yay! It's called The City Is Coming to Erase It All. It sounds really intense, but it's actually really, really, really lovely. It's basically the three of us down in Zena in Cornwall, getting all grounded and folky and acoustic, and it's really nice. Produced by our dear friend Sam Okell in his own spot. With our friends Charlie on strings and Martin on cello. Oh man, we just had a really deeply, intensely nice time, and hopefully that's reflected in some of these lovely, lovely tracks. The City Is Coming to Erase It All, album number 9 from FINK.
Window down, night air thick with the smell of the fields. memorize your senses, knowing that the city's coming to erase it all.
So all this stuff was going on, but the kind of revolution of recording bands, like kind of traditional bands in this way, didn't really happen until the 2000s, when you get the sort of Pro Tools Logic moment, right? Because you know, still in the late 80s and 90s, rock and indie bands, they were still tied to the studio. Really.
You're still tied to tape.
Yeah, you really didn't have very many bands who were kind of doing it on their own at all. It was all.
If you want the kind of success that the bands that you love have had, you have to tread that path.
Yeah.
And until you had digital recording systems, you were tied to tape.
Yes.
And tape costs a fortune. And
exactly.
it's not only does the bloody machine you need to use tape cost, 50 grand.
Yeah.
And each tape costs 400 quid
Yeah.
for 5 minutes a time. And someone's got to lend you that money. It was explained to me when I worked at Sony back in the early days by one of my mentors, Olivia. He said to me, "You've just written Candle in the Wind," and you go to a bank and you say, "I've just written Candle in the Wind. I promise you this is a massive single.
Yeah.
Can you lend me 6 million quid?" And they're going to be like, "Get out."
Yeah.
And that's where the record companies can step in and say, "Sure, we'll take 80% of the profit, but we'll lend you the money."
Yeah.
And so when you have a cultural scene that's pushing so hard, and on the one hand where all this music's being made for nothing, all this money's being made for nothing over here, and on the other side you've got indie bands struggling because it's like, we want to do an album, but it's going to cost 20 grand.
Yeah.
And who's going to lend us the money? We have to sign a gruesome lifetime of copyright horror deal with Polymer Records, just to live the dream that we want, which, as we know, is probably going to fail.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
it's kind of. But the great thing about dance music and hip hop music in these underground cultures is that failure's not baked in at all, because there isn't such a thing as failure.
Right.
Just doing it is enough.
Yeah. Well, at first there wasn't such a thing as success either.
As a DJ, when I was first DJing, there was definitely no career choice. This was not a career choice. There was no David Guetta on a yacht with a £2.5 million Rolex on. Didn't exist. It wasn't an option. It was much more like the 90s baggy jeaned version of Lemmy saying rock and roll is not a career. Yeah. It's a lifestyle choice. And when I said to my parents, "I'm a DJ," they were just kind of like, well,
and that's your parents, who were fairly kind of
really cool, but
forward-thinking
they
people.
Didn't, of course, fair enough. At that point, they didn't have anything to tether that to.
No,
They saw the Glastonbury footage on the BBC of Orbital playing the dance tent, and they were kind of simultaneously, "Oh, right, this is what you do," and "Oh my God, this is what you do." And it's kind of like, I wish I was doing that, Mum. That's like the absolute apex of what I want to do. There's no career path, so there's no failure. And most importantly, in my own limited experience, I bought my first equipment from a student loan, and then when I left college, I borrowed a couple of grand off my grandparents to buy some gear to make my demos for Ninja.
Yeah,
that's all I needed. But if I was an indie band, I need the instrument I'm going to play. I need the studio and the tape. Yeah, I need some record company to believe enough in me to pay for all of this. And that's almost like, that's an impossible hurdle to straddle over.
So can you remember the first time? I mean, you were using Cubase at first, right?
Yeah, I used the first version of Cubase on floppy disk.
Right.
I can still remember the name of the bootlegger. It was by the Ant Mob or something like that.
Okay.
I can see the floppy disk.
Right.
I bought it off a friend at college who sold it to me for £40, which was quite a lot back then.
Yeah, sure.
And he pulled out the floppy disk out of his, trench coat. "Here you go, mate. This will sort you out." Kind of thing.
So
and
you
I was
using Cubase all the way through the 90s?
Yeah, all the way through. It was one of the first ones you could use.
Wow. Okay.
And in the beginning of all of this, you couldn't record audio digitally, so there wasn't the computing power for it. Pre-laptop, pre-towers. So you would buy these Atari computers, but the 520 and the 1040, and they would just run your MIDI.
Yes.
And the MIDI would run your synths.
Yeah.
and your drum machines, so they'd all play at the same time.
Yeah,
This was all still quite new.
Right.
And then you would then run all of that sound into a little mixing desk, and then you'd run that into your DAT machine or your cassette at the time. And so it was that basic.
Yeah.
And when samplers came in, you would then trigger your sampler like you trigger your synth.
Yeah.
So I want it to go ooh, ooh, and you give it a key and you press the key and it does that when you want it to do it.
Yeah.
But you couldn't record a band or
Yeah,
a vocal or anything like that yet. There wasn't the tech for it.
So that happened towards the end of the 90s, right?
That kind of thing tended, I think in the massive studios, in the big ones, they had like digital 4-tracks and things like that. They had the financial power to buy these things. And in a way, you're like, well, if you're going to spend that much money, why don't you just do it to tape?
Yeah.
But
well, it's there was a period, because when I did that producing podcast with my cousin, who's a producer as well, we interviewed Billy Bush, and what became kind of clear quite quickly is that there were two types of producers at that time. There were the ones who embraced it, and Billy was definitely one of those, and the ones who didn't. So you had people like my cousin and Tim Palmer, his friend. They were shown the prototype of Pro Tools, by some eager person, and they would be like, "Yeah, we're good. Don't worry, we're fine." And then what they'd find after a while is, "Oh no, we have to start kind of getting to know it a little bit." And there was this crazy period of about 5 years where they were running both, tape and digital,
for sure.
And after a while, I think my cousin just went, "Oh, you know what? To hell with it. I'm just going to ditch the tape now." But I suppose
of course.
at that time, it was the technology had moved on to the point where he could ditch it.
Yeah, like no one in the bedroom world had Pro Tools.
Sure.
That rig was so expensive you could buy a car. My 950 cost about 800 quid. So it's kind of like, I can't be even imagining recording with any kind of with Pro Tools. That was crazy. And with Pro Tools, you also had to buy all the outboard gear, the sound card, and all this. You had to buy all this extra stuff.
There's no plugins really.
No, nothing. Point. Yeah, it was really, really, really expensive.
Yeah.
But what the producers were realizing, which is what all the underground guys were already using their when they started to get really early versions of like software that could record audio, like Pro Tools, like early versions of it, was that you could achieve perfection without needing the artist to be perfect. You could just do it yourself.
Yeah.
I need to clean up this vocal. I don't need the artist to sing it better. I can just click away.
Right.
Okay, blunt instrument, early wooden, flinted tools, but it led to perfect. There's no alternative takes in the noughties. It's all like, well, there's only one version of that track because we did it perfectly in Pro Tools. There you go. Yeah. Whereas in the 50s, you're going to have a whole day of takes, then we'll just pick the best one on tape. When you were able to record audio using your technology, that really was a massive game changer because it meant that everybody could record. And weirdly, I'd like to say that when I first got Instagram, all of a sudden I felt that I could just be a photographer. It's so easy. I just put this lens on it and it looks like a photo.
Right.
But you quickly realize, photographers have a certain skill that I don't have, or they have an eye for a subject or something.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened with the whole kind of euphoric embracing of I can record everything myself. But you soon learn,
definitely,
Bowie sounds great. How on earth did they make that sound so good?
Sure.
And it's like a skill set you don't have.
Well, this is what kind of happened, isn't it? Like 2010s, I've got it down here as the return to producers are quite good, really.
Oh, yeah, lovely. Yeah.
Because,
so who are you thinking of when you say that?
Then we start getting people like Ethan Johns, who's and he was all about where do you put the mics and, do you need that cymbal?
Yeah, Mumford's, Laura Marling. Yeah.
And then you have James Ford.
Oh, amazing producer.
And Dan Carey, who was, and those people are all about the recording. It's almost gone back to how it was before.
It definitely has. I mean, if we could record to tape, we would jump at that, wouldn't we? It's like, I'd love to. It's got a sound, it's got a warmth.
Yeah.
Some people still do, and they still insist on using it for bass and drums.
Right.
Primus continues to do that, I think. Right. And Guy Sternberg, a wonderful guy who we know in Berlin, his studio is largely based around analog.
Super analog purist.
Yeah, super analog. I mean, so it's still there.
I mean, I learned this lesson from Guy Sternberg. I did the Low Swing session record with him. And then I listened to it, and it sounds so amazing, or no computers involved, all to tape.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, it made me realize that's why all the records of the past sound so good.
Yeah.
They were all done with amazing mics, amazing desks, straight to tape.
Yeah.
Oh my! And then taken to air, mixed down straight from the tape, taken to Abbey Road, cut to the vinyl. This is how Guy does his stuff, But the money it costs to do that, dude, that's a hot. That
Sure.
that catches your breath. It's really but then every record was done like that in the 70s, And it was only in the kind of the absolute Wild West years of dance music and hip hop culture where we weren't told that you needed to mix it down. Remember when we did Distance and Time?
Yeah.
And Andy Barlow was like, okay, I've done the record now. I need to mix it down. And us and Ninja were like, what do you mean? I thought you'd already done that.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
No, you got to do this extra thing now.
Yes.
It's kind of like with dance music, you would just put it on DAT, take it to the cutter, they'd cut it, you'd put it out.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even master it.
So can you remember the first time you recorded, as you were saying, like recording audio? Like, as in, I'm playing the guitar and I'm
Yeah, it was a PC. Yeah, I do remember that.
Right.
Yeah. I do remember my tower. Yeah. It
Okay,
cost
and that was
a
in
fortune.
your
It was in the London studio.
the studio.
basement studio. Yeah.
Okay, and was that while you were doing Fresh Produce?
Yeah.
Okay,
I could record a few things.
yeah. And when you were doing Fresh Produce, did you ever have the thought, I want to get someone else to produce this?
No, God, no.
So it was very much like, I'm doing all of this.
Yeah, I
This is
mean,
what
if
I'm
someone
doing.
else came into the room, they'd know what I was stealing. They'd know all the samples. Why it's not on Spotify.
Right. And then Biscuits for Breakfast, was that ever a conversation about? Were you always going to be the producer of that?
Well, because one of the outcomes of working in dance music
Yeah.
and electronic music,
Yeah.
and similarly hip hop and punk, I'd say is the same thing,
Yeah.
is that I don't need a producer because I can do it myself. It's right and wrong at the same time. Like you guys were there, so you would you know what it was like recording an album. Like I wasn't a producer, as in Timmy had to lean over his drum kit because our extension lead for his headphones wasn't long enough. And Guy would come down and spend a weekend, and we would just get the bass line, play them until we found the bit that just sounded really good. Now, as a producer, I can think, oh, if only I'd just compressed that in the right way, I could have just used any of that. But it was more like, I was still coming from that 90s ethos of the producer does everything.
Yeah.
And now I have you guys, it's kind of like having a sample library.
Right.
Guy, you're a bassline sample library. Tim, you're a drum kit sample library.
Yeah.
It was only the fact that as a producer, the one thing I had that didn't cost anything was my time.
Sure.
So we could play and get things to sound exactly right, and then we could record them.
Yeah.
I wasn't tied to tape. I didn't have anything like that. It was just Ninja Tune. I'm sure would have loved for me to have a producer. They were kind of aware that we could have. Obviously they knew more than us at that point, but Dave Sitek was mentioned on a few
really?
albums and stuff, and other producers for sure. But I don't think FINK as a thing was seen as an act at that point. It was definitely seen as a producer who's singing some stuff, kind of thing.
Yeah. Around this time, I guess I was getting, because we always had, because I was in band with Guy obviously for many years, and we were frequently put into studios with engineers, and I struggled to kind of tell myself whether they were producers or engineers.
Well, there we go.
Are we being produced? Are we being engineered? And I remember when we went into that little funny studio in Harlow the Square, and there was the guy Anthony from Collapsed Lung who was producing this, 3-4 songs or whatever. That was the very first time I remember thinking, this guy's a producer, because he was doing things like saying to us, right, is this the right tempo? Are you recording this the right tempo? Is this the right key? Who's playing this part? Who's playing that part? How are we doing this? And I remember thinking, this is what it's like to actually have a producer. Yeah. And that was mid 90s, wasn't it? I mean, and I suppose that was to tape.
Yeah,
that
would have been to tape, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then, from then on, like every time we were in with a person, I was always sort of thinking, okay, they're producing it now. So I was starting to build a definition for what
I worked that out quite quickly as a producer myself. You're as good as your engineer.
For sure.
So if the engineer's good, this session's going to be fine.
Yeah.
It allows the producer to be the ideas guy and the let's make sure everything's great,
Yeah.
or let me get the right performances out guy.
Yeah.
As opposed to the where's the mics, what leads are we using, where's the mic stand kind of guy. You know, in a way, you want your producer to be thinking about your music just as much as what does it sound like.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, the dance music thing was very anti-production in a weird way.
Yeah.
It was very much kind of like, don't think about it too much because this music won't be around in a couple of months.
Yeah.
It's so disposable. It is like junk. It's like snack food.
Yes.
None of us were trying to make seminal moments.
Yeah.
We were just trying to make cool stuff. There are exceptions to that. You mentioned at the end of the last podcast, people like FINK Twin, whose music has effortlessly survived, hasn't aged most of the time, hasn't aged a day from the early 90s when he was making it, because he didn't care. So much that he didn't care that it's great music.
Yeah.
The rest of us were a little bit concerned about what people thought, because that was kind of part of what we did. We want our friends to like it. We want people to dance to it. Whereas Aphex seems to really doesn't care about you at all, which makes him a rock star.
Yeah, he's exploring the boundaries of sonics, essentially, isn't
totally
he?
is.
He's like, what can we actually achieve sonically?
I mean,
The
Aphex
experience of the listener is definitely sometimes deliberately cruel.
I mean, Aphex I definitely see in the slipstream of people like Kraftwerk.
Yeah.
Even though Kraftwerk seems kind of slick and kind of nice, you know, Kraftwerk had to make their own instruments because they just didn't exist.
Right.
And they were trying to become the robots. They were embracing that whole "we are the robots." And as producers, they also are the band. So they're producers who are the band, working so far in the future that it's like, oh my God, they're actually are they real or not? Was a question mark. Yeah. And making their own gear. And Aphex, similarly, he was so far ahead of the curve because he was taking up things apart, not caring. Aphex Twin is the producer and the artist all mixed, all mashed together. And, you know, it's who's next? You know?
Yeah. In the 90s, there was also people who crossed over, right? So you had William Orbit, you've mentioned already.
Orbital.
Who he was Madonna's producer.
Yeah.
And then he produced a Blur album.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of, then there's stories, apparently I've read some of the stories about him producing the Madonna album, is that she wasn't used to that process at all.
Yeah.
So she spent a day waiting for the sequencer to be fixed or something.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. A lot of troubleshooting in those days.
Exactly.
Similarly, Bjork crossed over from the other side.
Right,
She was straight up indie darling, Sugar Cube's already famous. And then she fell in with the whole Manchester crew.
That's right.
And was doing stuff with 808 State because she just loved this whole dance thing. It was so much more interesting to her than being in indie bands, which I imagine... You know, all through this period, though, that we're talking about, we've got bands like the Smiths making music and, you know, in indie being redefined and recreated.
Yeah.
But I guess musically, it's really seismic and important. But I guess sonically, it was still guitars, drums, bass, singer, songs, bridge.
Yes.
Whereas in this other world, it was just kind of like none of that.
Yeah.
There's no song, there's no chorus, there's no lyrics, there's no singer. And dance music, arguably, it's not even music most of the time.
Right.
I mean, literally, what is that?
Yes.
Is techno music if there's no music in techno? Then it's something else.
I know. That must be where the Ninja Tune publishing company name comes
Just
from.
isn't music.
Just isn't music. That must be.
Well, sampling created a whole nother world of pain because it's like, well, who owns it?
Who owns it?
Because if you're stealing someone else's master and creating a new master with it, and you're saying that you own this new master because you've manipulated someone else's master, but it's still theirs.
Yeah.
I think there should be. We talked about the Amen break. I think that drummer famously didn't die an incredibly wealthy man, even though he's probably the most prolific session musician in the history of art. Yeah. Because you know the judge that they in the Madonna case with the "Justify My Love" beat with Public Enemy was some octogenarian sort of guy who didn't know what he was. Wanted to go to his Puccini concert or something and couldn't say, well, yes, that's obviously the same beat. You've stolen it from that guy. Yeah. So that ruling ended all of that. And this is why, you know, production became more interesting again, I think, because the law caught up with the Wild West of sample whatever you like. No one's going to care. No one's making any money. But then when you do make money, all of a sudden everybody really cares, and the law gets involved. And there's a bit of a time lag there.
Yeah.
You know, and so when we came into the noughties, no more sampling.
No.
Or clear it.
Yeah.
You know, and clearing a sample costs money and time and lawyers. So, you know what, why don't you just replay it?
Yeah.
And then we're back to, you know, I need a drummer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, what we're going to do in the next episode is we're going to bring it all back to us and our specific experiences of producers.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of sort of where we've got up to, sort of mid-noughties, where you're about to make biscuits for breakfast, and then obviously we have other producers as well.
True. We haven't even covered Flood, Alan Moulder,
Well,
Nigel Godrich.
we
I mean,
haven't.
you know, but hey, you know, it's a big topic.
It's a big topic,
you know.
and the thing is that I guess, with the exception of Nigel Godrich, I was sort of wanting to touch upon producers who've kind of pushed the genre forward, and I think Godrich did do that.
Oh, no question.
You know, and funnily enough, he was very much one of those technological producers, and then he was like a kind of sixth member of Radiohead, and because they wanted to be, after Radiohead made their first album, they wanted to be like Massive Attack, who were very much self-produced, right?
Yeah, for sure,
You know,
and a lot
always,
of samples,
and always have been. You know, they still produce themselves. And,
yeah, I mean, you know, I remember being in Bristol, and I went to a club. It's called the Blue Mountain Club or something, and the DJ, he built his set on stuff that Massive Attack had sampled on Blue Lines.
Yeah,
I didn't know they'd sampled anything,
right.
so I thought Massive Attack were total geniuses at this point. And then he was playing me Billy Cobham and
Sure.
do and all this stuff,
Oh
and
my
I was
God.
just like, oh my God,
Yeah, I know.
they're
It's
just like
insane.
me. They're just loads better than I am. They're just nicking records and getting a singer over the top.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, Nigel Godrich, I was such a super fan. You know, I mean,
sure.
because you know, indie bands. Well, Radiohead sounded like Radiohead before Nigel Godrich, and then you can just hear what it sounds like after Nigel
Absolutely.
Godrich, and so that's what Nigel Godrich does.
The funny thing is, you can hear it changing on the Benz album.
Yeah.
Which is when he didn't produce it, but he started working with.
That's
them
it towards
on
the end, right?
Yeah.
It's the same with Flood. If you want to know what a producer does, listen to the Warpaint second album and listen to the Warpaint first album.
Right.
And the first album is done by someone I don't know, or maybe by themselves, whatever. The second album's done by Flood, and the difference is astonishing. Similarly with Jeff Barrow, Portishead, he's done so much more than that. But what he did for the Horrors,
Yeah.
you listen to the album before Jeff Barrow, and you listen to Primary Colours, which Jeff Barrow produced.
Yeah.
You can hear what a producer does.
Right.
It's so interesting what a good producer can make a band do.
Yeah.
And obviously the band want to do it. There's like, we
Yeah.
want to do this, and you're the guy. Can you help us
Yeah.
be this band? And,
Sure.
you know, it's really astonishing that a good producer in the right space with the right band, because
Yeah.
part of the battle
Yeah.
as a producer, and which I've had myself a lot, is you might have a really great idea because you're hearing this band outside of their own bubble and being like, oh, you know, it would be really cool if we did this.
Yes.
And then the whole world would go,
Yeah.
and the band are like, yeah, no, I'm not really into that.
Oh no.
You know, and you
Yeah.
think, okay, it's your music, you're the band, it's
Sure.
your thing, but
But
if you
yeah.
just do this,
Yeah. Or at
And
least
I-
try it. You know.
and normally they're a bit more extreme than what the band would go for.
Yes. Sure.
Because you're the one living
That's how
outside
to-
of their bubble.
That's how to push it, though, isn't it? But we'll talk about this in the next, because
Oh,
Flood,
good.
Flood was good at that, good at sort of going round the houses, you know.
He was.
But we'll talk about that in the
Wow, for the
next episode
concluding episode,
of the producers.
the Producers Trilogy.
Excellent.
Nice.
Speak to you next time.
See you later.